What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Louis Ezekiel. Joining me tonight, my pal and yours, Jeremy Versillo. Jeremy, how are you doing this fine Tuesday evening?
What's up, Louis? Not too bad myself. Just watching some hockey games and enjoying the relaxing atmosphere of the NHL tonight for some reason.
Yeah, right on. I wanna take credit for something interesting that we found. I got an unusual award from Kevin Hebert last week. I had the lowest defenseman contribution of any team in the Cupful. All 650 odd teams. Nobody had fewer points from their defensemen than me. 17.5 points from my lone defenseman, Sean Dursey. I was able to hold just one defenseman through the whole week without having any crazy schedule log jams. So pretty fun. I'm trying to model myself a little bit off of Sham's view of defensemen, and it's working okay. I had a big win last week, so worked out all right.
Whatever works. Any strategy is a valid strategy.
That's right. Yeah. So that was pretty interesting. I would have guessed I would be down there somewhere, but 600 and whatever, 58th out of 658 was, I'm rarely, right there at the tippy top. So got to brag while I have the chance. We got tons of news here today. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Headlining things, the injury to Tage Thompson. This happened just a little while ago. He took his first injury from a trip when he went down from Charlie McAvoy, but he was able to return for the second period. Although he did not take the initial face-off, that went to Jeff Skinner, which had us speculating that maybe it wasn't the lower body like they had said, maybe it was an upper body thing, but then he took a shot off of the hand or the wrist after he returned, and that is what sent him to the locker room for good. All we know right now is that he was out for the remainder of the game. Don't really have any other updates than that, but of course, watch Game Day News NHL, and I imagine we will have the opportunity to tell you a little more during Thursday's show. But of course, not great for Thompson, not great for Buffalo in general. Obviously, that's one of those injuries that no one really is going to benefit from, and it's going to mostly be a drawback to everybody involved.
Not much else to add there. Tage Thompson, an injury would be huge, especially if it is a hand-related injury, which kind of looked like it was. That would affect his shot. That would affect his ability to impact teammates. Wishing the best for Tage, because the game's more fun when you get to watch him play. Yeah,
100%. And we're getting some info in the chat. We'll see if we can source it, but Adam K is telling us that Shams has retweeted that Granato said Thompson will miss significant time with that second injury. So obviously we'll be able to confirm the validity. And if Shams is already tweeting about it, then that tells us it's probably pretty good info, but let's hope for the best, obviously. But yeah, you don't like to hear that, certainly. For our Tage owners, Elon, pouring one out for you, buddy, at this news. Well, maybe he can bounce back, because a couple teams have bounced back from some rough games. The Oilers bounced back a little bit. Not a great start to the Knoblauch era in Edmonton. They gave up the first goal about a minute in, or I think in the first minute maybe, but they did score the next four. Mixed results for the new lines. Connor McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Gagne controlled play, 16 shot attempts to 10, but gave up the only even-strength goal. Hyman, Draisaitl, Evander Kane line had less luck controlling opportunities, 16 shot attempts for, 22 shot attempts against, but they did manage the even-strength goal. We may see Knoblauch continue to tinker with the lines until they find a combination that works, although Euler in the Discord group mentioned that the scuttlebutt is Connor Brown is more likely to end up in the top six. He's got that juniors relationship with Knoblauch like McDavid has. So that might come at Gagne's expense. And suggested that maybe once they find a combination they like, they're going to stick with it. So maybe less line juggling taking place throughout the season. Let the teammates kind of get used to each other. Also a nice bounce back for Skinner after a pair of really bad starts with identical .833 save percentages. Skinner has two quality starts in a row, allowing one goal on 18 shots to Seattle and one goal against on 33 shots to the Islanders. So if he was dropped for his poor performance and the timeshare, although Campbell's demotion fixed that latter problem, he might be worth an ad here if the Oilers have a bit of a dead cat bounce as they get going with the new coach.
I'm definitely interested in Skinner if you've got the chance to add him. As for the third wheel on the Draisaitl or McDavid lines, I think we've played that song and dance long enough. I am kind of over those guys. I added Gagne this week and am disappointed, but I guess I'm holding him for Wednesday because that was what I had planned on, and no use wasting a move because I'm panicking.
Well, I'll give you credit where credit's due. I also added Gagne, but I dropped him so that I could add Stolars, who's got the start this evening on Tuesday, starting in about half an hour from when we're recording this. Getting that start against San Jose, and then I'm trying to use your strategy. If that backup goalie gets a start before the back-to-back, means he's likely to get 2 games. Worked really well last week with Casey DeSmith. So I'm hoping I can recapture some of that magic here. So trying to live by Sham's rules, now trying to live by your rules a little bit because you guys have been very successful. Speaking of finding some success, we had another team that a nice bounce back out in Colorado. Jeremy, give us the lowdown on the last game from the Avs.
Colorado absolutely dominated my Seattle Kraken on Monday with me in the crowd. It was just a really good performance from everyone. Their fantasy studs were fantasy studs. Georgiev has had a solid game, even though he only faced 18 shots. I don't really have anything to say about these guys. Like, you want the good players. Ross Colton may be of interest. He was getting some power play 2 time, which I think he was on before. Valeri Nichushkin is up on power play 1 with Lehkonen hurt. But just keep rolling your Avalanche. They're one of the best teams in the league. I know they've had some stumbles. No signs of concern there.
Yeah, I think maybe Georgiev had maybe a bit of a buy low window while he was really struggling. Obviously that really ugly game against St. Louis when we all sort of thought St. Louis might be dead on the water. But I think any buy low window will be closed shortly if it was ever open at all. He is a average to above average goalie on a good team. That's a guy that you would like to have. So hopefully you stayed steady despite a couple poor returns there. All right, well, we got a whole slew of injuries and outjuries to talk about besides the one that we opened up the show with. Carter Hart returned to action. First game in about 2 weeks since he was injured in Buffalo. Hart's been solid to good this season so far. 63% quality start percentage, which would be the highest quality start percentage of his career if he can hold on to that number. Really, looks like he has nice value for his ADP. Only 2 really bad starts this year, one of them the partial game in which he was injured. Of course, that does put him at 25% really bad starts compared to 20% last year, but it's a really small sample size, and I'm not going to count that injury game against him. He only played 10 minutes. So, he's really been performing, and it's been good to see, so good to have him back, certainly. We got an injury down the middle in Nashville, Jeremy.
Tommy Novak is out for 4 to 6 weeks. I assume that's a broken bone or a muscular injury. I didn't see exactly what it was. That's unfortunate as he's been following up his very old rookie season with a pretty strong sophomore one. He's been borderline fantasy relevant for people on that second line. The replacement getting in there is Cody Glass, who is just back from an injury himself, although he has 0 points in 7 games this year. I remember he was getting a little bit of draft hype, at least. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be adding him, but in deeper leagues, you could take worse shots if a lot of the good players are around.
Yeah, I'm not big into Cody Glass. I was kind of into Tommy Novak when he was getting that power play 1 time. I'm not sure if I'm psyched about his replacement. He's been around for a while. Haven't seen him really get to produce, between Vegas and Nashville. But yeah, hopefully he can take advantage of this opportunity. Another guy coming back from injury, Jacob Markstrom returned. Dustin Wolf was sent back down after getting a start. He's a guy a lot of folks are excited about, so it was nice to see him get a game in. They did lose 4-1 to Ottawa, but he saved 34 of 38. Only ended up with minus 0.31 goals saved above average. So he did about as well as an average NHL goalie would have done against the quality of shots that he faced. he can go back and continue to rack up starts at the AHL level. No reason to hold him with Markstrom back. We're back to the status quo in Calgary. And for what it's worth, Calgary has been hotter lately. I believe they have scored 3+ goals in 4 of their last 5 and are doing all right for themselves this evening as well.
Yeah, Markstrom with a 33 saves on 34 shots, got his team the 2-1 win. My boy Connor Zary with 2 points. I think he's a rookie you should be looking his direction after some of our previous rookies this year have kind of fizzled out and been sent back down or relegated to bottom 6 roles.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. We talked about Zary a little bit previously, but just really exciting to see him kind of breaking out the way that he is. Good on him, and hopefully he keeps it up. It's more exciting when you have hot rookies, for sure. You noticed some good news for fans of the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, their coach said that Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour could play on this road trip. The weird thing is the road trip ends Friday, so that means they could be back Thursday or Friday. That's good news for the people who've been stashing them. I was under the impression that Montour was going to be back a bit sooner than Ekblad, so take that as you will. Keep an eye on them. Be ready to drop Oliver Ekman-Larsson as soon as one of them comes back, though.
Yeah, I think that is going to kill OEL's value. And yeah, you pointed out, and they're still sounding like Ekblad might be back later than Montour, but instead of it being, we'll have Ekblad back by Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, and Montour back by American Thanksgiving and Ekblad back by Christmas. Now it's like maybe we'll have Montour back on Thursday and Ekblad back on Friday. We'll see if that's how things actually play out, but obviously things are progressing very well there. Hopefully they don't rush back. I imagine they're taking all of the necessary precautions there. And obviously we're very eager to see them come back, but you don't want to see it, with a return and then, an injury again. Not that the Bennett thing had anything to do with rushing back, but obviously we've already seen one example out of Florida where a player came back and was injured again right away. So hopefully we don't see anything like that again. And then Darcy Kuemper, this is kind of minor. He sort of returned. He returned to back up Charlie Lindgren. Lindgren was very effective shutting out Vegas. I was very sad because Ovi fell down instead of scoring an empty net goal. Come on, man. If you're going to beat Gretzky, especially at the pace you're going at, you need all the empty netters you can get. I thought maybe McMichael might pass to him, so that he could get one goal closer, but probably better to secure the victory. That was when it was 1-0 and, the McMichael goal made it 2-0. And then Beck Mallenstein came up and insult to injuried the, Logan Thompson starters by scoring one extra goal while he was in the net. So, Kuemper, you imagine will probably start the next game, but Lindgren maybe has earned himself a little bit of a leash with his shutout here today. We will have some hot and cold streaks for you on the other side, but we're going to take a quick break here. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Jeremy, we've got some really interesting hot and cold streaks here. We've got 3 players that we don't want to look like. Let's try that again. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Jeremy, we've got 3 players on hot streaks right now, and we are going to take a look at them and give them a rank for the rest of the season. Why don't you start us off with the first on our list?
Our first guy is Mathieu Joseph over on Ottawa. He's been playing on the second line, but the second line includes Tim Stützle and Claude Giroux. The problem with Mathieu Joseph is despite being on point per game pace currently, he's only shooting twice per game and is barely getting any power play time. So there's some concerns with his percentages being a bit over the top, his 5-on-5 shooting percentage especially, and I don't know how sustainable this is, but also he may still be a reasonable player to own even if it's not fully sustainable.
Yeah, I like that. Anytime that you're lining up with 2 players of Stützle and Giroux's caliber, I think you have to pay attention. And obviously he's not just along for the ride. He's producing too. He's not Nick Pauling it up out there. He's contributing. So I think that is pretty exciting. I like that you brought up the power play concern. Our next guy, power play, is not as much of a concern, despite the fact that he is the second power play player. I want to talk about Matt Duchene, who has been hot with 6 points in the last 3 games prior to the one that they are playing here on Tuesday. The numbers look more or less online as in line last year's, except a little less time on ice and power play time on ice. Obviously, that second power play in Dallas has been really exciting. It was almost odd to see the first power play convert here. I was joking that they really were just the opening act for that second power play to come in and actually bury the puck. He's got that high on ice shooting percentage. It's the same thing he had, though, when he was successful a couple years back in Nashville. He also definitely benefited from some luck, but was also able to maintain that degree of luck for most of the season. So this is a guy that I am definitely interested in. I do not think he should be on waiver wires. I think he is a guy who is a really nice depth add who may very well be better than whoever you've got on the bottom of your list. Obviously, sometimes it is more valuable to use that spot for streaming, but if you've got some availability, Matt Duchene is a guy I would definitely take a look at. I might be giving away a little bit of where I'm going to place people when I rank them, but I am definitely into Duchene this season.
Duchene has been a solid player, and while he's no longer the franchise-ish player that people thought he could be when he was in Colorado, he still can very much drive a line and has good line mates and is going to put the puck in the net. I'm definitely skeptical of that 16% 5v5 shooting percentage. That's going to have to come down. And I'm not thrilled that he's on their power play too, which loses his exposure to Hintz and Robertson and Heiskanen and Pavelski. But he's a very good player, and he's performing kind of as he has in the past couple years as a secondary play driver, I'll call him.
Yeah, definitely. He seems to have developed some chemistry. A lot of the players who moved this season haven't necessarily had that instant chemistry with their new team. So I think that's kind of exciting to see from him. But yeah, definitely see your point. Obviously, we are going to see some regression from that level of shooting. So I'll keep that in the back of my mind here. Temper that excitement just a little bit. Tell us a bit about the third guy on our list here.
Last but not least, we have back from the dead Sean Monahan. If you remember, Sean Monahan hasn't been fantasy relevant or honestly even NHL relevant in 3 years. He suffered some really unfortunate recurring injuries in the end of his Calgary days and just hasn't been able to get quite right. But now he's got 13 points in 15 games, only 4 games without a point, 2.5 shots on goal per game played, and he's got the highest shots on goal and time on ice since 1819 or 1920. He's line 2, power play 1 in Montreal. And what's interesting about Monahan is if you go to his Frozen Tools page, everything is red, meaning that he's overshooting his percentages and it's unsustainable. But if you look a bit closer, the way Frozen Tools works is I believe they look at the last 3 years average and consider that your baseline. So his 5-on-5 shooting percentage is only 10.1%, which is slightly high, but not the absurdly high 16 or 20% that our last 2 guys have had. Same goes for his secondary assist rate, his personal shooting percentage, and his PDO. It's all red because he's been so bad for 3 years in a row, and now it's a little bit over-indexed, but if he's back to the player he was when he played with Johnny Hockey in Calgary, I think this is pretty sustainable, and I'd be excited to own him on one of my teams.
Yeah, it's really interesting. This was a guy that we had all sort of given up for dead. I'm really glad you pointed that out because I also noticed the glaring red on that Frozen Tools page. And I didn't think twice about it, but you're absolutely right. It would be nearly impossible for him to not be overachieving compared to how he did the last few years if he was scoring at all. So that's a really good point as well. All right. So time to put our money where our mouth is a little bit here. You pointed out, and this is the way that I would go, is that we recently got to take a peek at Dom Lucian's recently released rest of season projections. They are in the order that I picked them independently. I just happen to agree with Dom here. I swear, because I did come up with my list separately. He has Duchene at the top, Monahan second, and Joseph third, and has Monahan and Duchene as holds. I think Joseph is fine to hold as long as he's on that second line and producing, but if he starts to go cold, or heaven forbid, if he gets shifted down, I would definitely be ready to move on fairly quickly. But that's the same order that I would have them. I have a inkling as to the way that you are going to go on this list. I think you're going to disagree with me here a little bit.
I am, and I'm going to disagree with Dom, which is usually a bad decision in fantasy. And just for some context, we got these rest of season projections, and I plugged in Cupful and ranked them by points per game. So Duchene came in around 4.3 points per game, Monahan around 4.1, and Joseph around 3.3. And usually for a forward, I consider the cut line to be just under 4.0. I know everybody's going to have different opinions on that, but kind of threw an off-the-cuff number there to give some context. For me personally, I would have Monahan over Duchene. I like the deployment better, and I think the ratios are slightly more sustainable. And I actually would have Duchene right on my cut line. Joseph, I think, is an easy cut in a slow week for Ottawa, but fine to hold otherwise. Duchene, I think, is one of my favorite categories of players, the player that should be on somebody's roster, but maybe not yours. He's one of the best, however many teams we have times ever many roster slots we have, players. But if your team is good, he may be a cut because he's just the worst player on your roster. Monahan, on the other hand, I think any team should be happy to have until he starts losing his deployment or, heaven forbid, he gets hurt again. So yeah, that's my disagreement with you on how I'd rank those players.
Yeah, I always tell my students, you don't always have to leave class in total agreement with one another, but you should make an effort to understand where the other person's opinion is coming from. So while I disagree, and I'm sure this is going to end up on our accountability posts here. So we'll check back in a month and see how we're doing on these bets. We are now being held to account to our takes, which is kind of fun, gives us some content to discuss. So we'll check back in on these numbers here before too much longer. But yeah, I think I understand why you made the selections that you did, even though I think I would take Duchene ahead of Monahan. I just, the shades of Monahan being really bad are so close, so looming. I know Duchene was nothing, great last year either. But I have a little more faith in that Dallas production, and they have seemed to really like that second power play. I see where you're coming from. I like the call. I think they're pretty close. But yeah, when we flip the coin, you tip in Monahan's direction. I tip in Duchene's direction, and that is just fine. We'll be seeing how that's going in not too long. Jeremy, we have hit the end of another show. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me, and it's always exciting to discuss some rankings. I think that's one of the more fun segments we do, is where we name 2 or 3 players and argue about what order we would have them in.
Yeah, I think that's always good. That's, not to lean too hard into the teacher thing, but I love to have my students do power rankings because it forces them to make a choice, which they often are reluctant to do. And then as soon as your list is different from someone else's, you've got something to discuss and you have to find some evidence to defend your point of view. So it's a great way to tackle these types of situations. Thank you to everybody in the Discord who joined us live. Thank you everyone who is listening to the show here on Wednesday. Please be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK. You can find Brian and Elon at Keeping Carlson. Definitely use GameDayTweets.com to get all the best information from Twitter without having to slog through the rest of Twitter, including team by team and searchable tweets by player name. I did a ton of research on that today, so what a great resource to have available to us. Please visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. John Reed is our digital media producer, and until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.